The religious love to pretend that atheists have it all wrong, but they never actually talk to atheists, do they? They just toss out their own straw men of what they think atheists would say without actually going to find out what atheists actually say. Because if they ever actually listened to atheists, well, then they'd actually have an intelligent, rational conversation instead of what they actually do. So, yeah, here we go again. And today, we're back once again with Adherent Apologetics. And honestly, tell me if you agree or not, but it feels like I've seen absolutely everything that he's about to say in his videos, even though he's been corrected on numerous occasions and shown to be completely wrong. What does that tell you exactly? It tells me that he's just not listening. And I find that it's a curious phenomenon, one that Zach is clearly not the only one guilty of. But he wants us to think that there are 6 things that atheists get wrong about Christianity, but obviously and demonstrably it's Zach here who's really the one that's mistaken. Will he ever admit it? Yeah, don't hold your breath.
There are serious objections that can be raised to the existence of God.
Not that you care, because you simply ignore them. All apologists do. They have no way to answer those objections, so they simply pretend that they don't exist. That's why there are so many atheists out there pointing out just how absurd the religious mindset actually is. And if you wanted to be different, Zach, you could, actually engage with your detractors in your comments. Like it's been pointed out to you numerous times, but we all know that you just don't do that. So please continue. This isn't going anywhere good, I'm sure.
But there are numerous arguments that are made by atheists that need to stop being used because nobody takes them seriously.
Now, before you get started, I want to point out something that gets a lot of attention around here. Far too many claims of things atheists say by the religious are things that, let's be honest, no actual atheist ever says. They're simply made up for the sake of an object lesson aimed at the already religious. Frank Turek, Andy Bannister, the crew over at STR, and dozens of others, they have all been caught making claims about atheists that simply do not stand up to any critical scrutiny whatsoever. Because guess what, Zach? We actually care about the truth. I know you don't, but we do. So I hope that's not what you're going to do. But I think that we all know that you are. Anyway, I'll be keeping my fingers crossed for you, Zach. Don't disappoint me.
So in this video, we're going to cover 6 of the worst arguments against the existence of God in Christianity.
I just had a thought. It would be really nice if you, and other apologists too, but we're talking to you right now, so we'll just say you. But it would be really nice if you'd actually post links to atheists making these arguments. But yeah, I'm sure you won't. So for the sake of argument, I'll just pretend that you actually heard an atheist making all of these different arguments. I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt. I'll try not to laugh too hard at any of them, I promise. No, I did say try. No guarantees, but let's get on to it.
At number 6, we have calling God random names.
That's not an argument. At best, maybe that's an insult, and frankly, we don't care. So let's get this out of the way right off the bat. An argument, according to the dictionary, is a reason or set of reasons given with the aim of persuading others that an action or idea is right or wrong. Calling someone names simply doesn't fit the definition. It may be a fallacious debate tactic, an ad hominem, but it isn't an argument. Alright, anyway, that's quibbling, but go ahead, Zach. Try to turn this initial failure around.
When atheists call God different names, such as a quote sky daddy or a quote flying spaghetti monster, it's really just a terrible strawman.
We're not calling your God a flying spaghetti monster. I'm not sure if this is just a gross misunderstanding on your part or just a dishonest claim, but you really ought to know better. Do a little research, so I'll fill you in. The Flying Spaghetti Monster was created in 2005 by Bobby Henderson as a satire of theistic gods. The Flying Spaghetti Monster has every bit as much evidence for its noodly appendages as your god has. For, well, whatever your god supposedly has. It's a comparison meant to point out the inherent irrationality of theistic belief in indemonstrable gods. It is not intended to be taken seriously. It is a joke. If you're not even aware of this, then it's no wonder you're so ignorant about just about everything else. Look it up before you continue to make a fool of yourself.
They will say that every other religion is made up, so why not just make up their own religion and worship the flying spaghetti monster, or a sky daddy, or something along these lines?
We don't worship anything. That's a joke. Nobody in the so-called Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster takes it seriously. It is meant to point out the silliness of what you people are doing. Maybe if you weren't so absurdly irrational, we wouldn't have to keep pointing it out. Give it a shot, Zach. This is exactly why we point out that we're not like you. You are making the error here that you think that we are acting the way that you do. And we're not. Figure it out.
Most religious beliefs, regardless of whether they are true or not, are held in traditions that have been transmitted from centuries upon centuries.
Big deal. The only thing that matters is whether or not they are factually true. People have believed all kinds of absurd nonsense that have been handed down for generations. So what? The only thing that actually matters is whether these ideas can be independently and objectively verified to be factually correct in the real world. How you feel about it, how long it's been going on, or how many people believe, none of that matters at all. There's a reason why each and every single one of those things is fallacious. You believe for fallacious reasons, Zach. Why can't you get that through your head?
It's not only is this disrespectful to people who believe in certain beliefs, it makes no logical sense as an argument against the existence of God.
Beyond the fact that it isn't an argument, period, I don't know where you got the bizarre idea that you automatically deserve respect for your beliefs. You don't. Respect is earned. It is not simply granted because you want it. Now, you do get a certain basic level of respect simply because you're a human and humans are a social species. But beyond that, you've got to do all the work. Your beliefs, they get nothing. They've earned nothing. In fact, they've earned a lot of derision. We don't actually owe you a damn thing. I don't care what you want. You haven't earned it. You have to show that the things that you believe, the things that are in your head, actually deserve our respect. And you do that by proving that they're actually true and respectable. You got a lot of work to do, Zach. Get to it.
At number 5 comes the argument that, quote, since the Bible is old, we shouldn't follow it.
I have never seen any atheist actually say that. Not once, not ever. Now, since I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt here, I'm not going to call you a liar because, for all I know, you actually heard some atheists say that once upon a time. You're right. It is a bad argument if anyone actually used it as an argument, but I can only go by my decades and decades of experience here and say that in the thousands and probably tens of thousands of discussions I've ever had with an atheist, not one has ever said that to me. Ever. I think this is one of the times I should say, citation needed, but I don't think I'll get one.
Many atheists will mock theists for following a book that was written about 2,000 to 4,000 years ago.
No, we will mock theists for following a book which cannot be demonstrated to be factually correct. It doesn't matter how old it is. It doesn't matter how much you like it. It doesn't matter how much you respect it, even though that respect is completely unearned. It is simply not supported by objectively verifiable evidence. That's the whole point. Now, I'm sure that sounds that way to you. I'm sure it sounds to you like, oh, we're just disrespecting you, we're mocking you. Well, that's because the religious are desperately seeking justification and validation for their beliefs, and therefore, instead of listening to what people are actually saying to them, they are simply reinterpreting it to sound silly so that they can safely ignore it and pretend that the actual criticisms don't exist. I don't think Christianity is any more valid than Scientology, and both of them are ridiculous for the exact same reasons. It has nothing to do with the age of the beliefs or their books.
This argument is a genetic fallacy. A genetic fallacy occurs when you attack an idea based off its history or its origin or its source rather than its actual meaning or content.
That much is true, but so far, this entire video has been a straw man. If you really want me to point out all of the logical fallacies that you engage in, I'd be more than happy to, but I don't think for 1 second that you'd care, or listen, or change, and you certainly wouldn't engage in any rational back and forth conversation on the subject, so it's really going to be a complete waste of my time. Again, since I don't think you can point to a single atheist that has ever made this so-called argument, I'm left wondering exactly what the point might be.
When atheists bring up the fact that the Bible was written anywhere from 2,000 to 4,000 years ago, depending on the book, they're attacking the origin of the Bible, not the actual meaning of it. So it's a genetic fallacy.
We've done that. You don't listen. So you invent this fantasy that we're somehow unable to attack the meaning and that we only go after shallow things like age. You have this bizarre fantasy that everyone is out to get you, but you've got it all right so you don't have to listen. It's really kind of sad when you think about it.
At number 4 is the argument that Hitler was a Christian.
That's not an argument, that's a historically demonstrable fact. Now, I know that you don't like that fact. A lot of theists don't. They'd rather pretend it doesn't exist, but too bad. In Mein Kampf, Hitler said specifically, and I quote, "Hence today I believe that I am acting in accordance with the will of the Almighty Creator. By defending myself against the Jew, I am fighting for the work of the Lord." In a public speech on April 12, 1922, he said, and I quote, "My feelings as a Christian points me to my Lord and Savior as a fighter." A lot of modern Christians think that they can simply ignore that and make up grand conspiracy theories about Hitler. He wasn't really serious after all. Okay, how do you know that? Where did you get your information, and how did you test it to see if it is actually true? You don't get answers from the religious to those questions because they've got nothing intelligent that they can say. Instead, they engage in the no true Scotsman fallacy, which I have a feeling Zach is about to wander into in just a second. Let's watch.
While this idea has been disregarded by about every serious historian, the idea that Hitler was a Christian has been circulating around some atheist circles online today.
And here we go with yet another fallacy, argumentum ad populum. It doesn't matter how many historians believe a thing. It is true or not true based on its own merits. One must examine the merits of the evidence, not the interpretation of the believers. It doesn't matter what you want to be true. It matters what the evidence supports. And clearly, the evidence supports that Hitler believed at least some Christian dogma and faith beliefs. You may not think he believed the right ones, but too bad for you. Christianity is, by definition, a person who has received Christian baptism or is a believer in Christianity. Hitler did both. You're just wrong.
So yes, Hitler did make statements that he was a Christian and that the Nazi movement was a Christian movement.
Which, apparently, the overwhelming majority of Nazis agreed with. Remember, they were the ones all running around with the belt buckles that read, "God with us." But it seems like I'm the one bringing all of the actual evidence to the table, and Zach here is just sitting there going, "Nuh-uh." Mine is an intellectual position. His is a purely emotional one. We can examine polls at the time showing that the overwhelming majority of Germans were, in fact, Christian. We can go back to Martin Luther and see that his views were largely in sync with Nazism, at least when it came to the Jews. The evidence is all that matters, and Zach here has absolutely nothing. Anyone surprised? No, neither am I.
But just because someone says that they're a Christian doesn't mean that they actually are a Christian.
And how do you determine if someone who says that they are a Christian actually isn't? Because you don't like the fact that they are? Because that's exactly how all of this reads. I hate to break it to you, Zach, but nobody died and elected you personal arbiter of all of Christendom. You don't have the right to make those decisions for anyone but you. And frankly, what you think doesn't mean a damn thing. It's the evidence, and you have none. So please, stop making a fool of yourself and move on.
Lawrence Rees, a British historian, wrote that Hitler never expressed any individual belief in the basics of Christian faith. Hitler's public announcements of faith came from a desire to not cause a quarrel with the church, which would hurt national unity in Germany. In addition, Hitler and his regime killed Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a devout Christian.
Yes, he did. You know why? Because Dietrich Bonhoeffer was part of a criminal conspiracy on Hitler's life. Now, I won't say that I personally wouldn't support such a thing because, yeah, but that's irrelevant to the reality. He worked for the German intelligence service as an agent working against the Nazis. Again, I'm not saying that I disagree with what he did, but, civil disobedience, by its very nature, carries risk. He was not executed because he was a Christian. He was executed because he was plotting against the life of the duly recognized head of the German state. But, evidence and all.
Now, why would these Christians, who at least they claim to be Christians, kill Christians?
Because those Christians were traitors to the German government and were plotting the murder of the head of that government. Come on, Zach, stop being stupid. You have to be better than that.
It's because they weren't Christians.
No, that's a rationalization on your part. Now, we could look at this differently. If someone who was, a Catholic priest or a Protestant minister or whatever you choose, went out and tried to murder Donald Trump or Barack Obama or whatever, if they were caught and convicted and executed for treason, would you say that the people in the government of the United States were not Christians because those other Christians didn't get off scot-free? Are you really that dumb, Zach? Seriously? Give us a break.
There is absolutely no reason to believe that Hitler was in fact a devout, practicing Christian.
Whether he was devout or practicing or whatever other qualifications you want to throw on it, that's just moving the goalposts around. What standards are you going to use here? Because if you want to demand that devotion and active involvement is required to be considered a Christian, then there aren't an awful lot of Christians out there, are there? You can't have it both ways. If Hitler wasn't a Christian, according to, say, the definition given in Acts, then there are painfully few Christians on the planet. Most of them are just giving it lip service. Thus, if we look at all of your other claims about the growth of Christianity in the future, which you've done in other videos, those are all just nonsense. Pick which hill you want to die on here, Zach, because either way, you're toast.
And number 3 is the idea that the universe is not fine-tuned.
And it isn't. We've been through this all before, and you don't pay any attention to what others have to say to you, so you're just going to make a complete fool of yourself once again. But go ahead. Let's see if you're still spouting the same laughably incorrect nonsense that you have all along, or if maybe you've learned something. Although for the latter, I don't think we should be holding our breath.
There are a lot of different ways that atheists will go with this argument. Some atheists will say that almost every part of the universe is uninhabitable to life, so the universe is not fine-tuned.
Are you saying that's untrue? Because it makes no sense to say that a thing is fine-tuned for something if it cannot exist in the vast majority of it. Keep in mind, you're not saying that the planet Earth is fine-tuned for life, because it's still not, because most places humans can't live unaided. You would need to define what you mean by fine-tuned, and to date, at least that I've seen, you haven't done that. Will you do a better job this time around? Let's see.
That is true, but then Earth becomes the exception to the rule, which is evidence of fine-tuning.
No, it doesn't, because 71% of the Earth is covered in water. Humans cannot live in the water, thus the majority of the planet is not fine-tuned for humans. Now, I know that you're saying life. I'm just pointing this out because it usually comes up later. Life has a damn hard time living, let's say, at the poles, or in the vast deserts, or a lot of other places. If this is what fine-tuning looks like, it's very unimpressive. Besides, as I pointed out before, you're not saying that the Earth is fine-tuned for life. You're saying that the universe is. And we're right back at square one when you do so. Make up your mind.
Why would Earth be any different than everywhere else in the cosmos?
Have you actually looked at the overwhelming majority of the cosmos? I mean, holy shit, Zach, stop demonstrating your blind ignorance and just look. Open your eyes. Are you aware of just how much nearly empty space there is between planets? Scientists estimate that physical matter, and that's everything, not just planets, but all of physical matter, only makes up about 4% of the overall mass of the universe. Exactly where is the fine-tuning if more than 96% of the universe is absolutely deadly to life?
Why are we so different? Because we're fine-tuned.
Different in what way? We know there are tons of other planets out there, but we just don't know that they have life on them. We also know that there's a lot of stuff out there that cannot possibly harbor life, at least not life that we can possibly imagine. Again, and I've said this before and it's been entirely ignored, but there's a big difference between a universe which is capable of life and a universe designed for life. Are we saying that the universe was designed for black holes? Because there's a hell of a lot of them out there after all. There are hundreds of millions of black holes in our galaxy alone, and those are only stellar mass black holes. There could be billions and billions and billions more that we don't even know about.
Some atheists will also deny fine-tuning by saying that life on Earth just fit into constants that govern the universe.
Which is true. Again, this is where Zach is going to go, nuh-uh, because he has nothing else he can say. But that's because he's desperately trying to rationalize his way to his God, and this is one of the ways that he and other irrational theists do so. Puddle and hole, Zach. Puddle and hole. The puddle was delusional, and so are you. Figure it out.
This idea, however, neglects the many constants mentioned regarding fine-tuning that are constants that affect whether or not a universe could form, not just carbon-based life.
And if it didn't form, nobody would be here to discuss any of this. The fact that we're here at all, the fact that this conversation is going on at all, is because we happen to be in a universe where life could exist. A universe where, a universe exists. That's really all there is to it. This reminds me of a discussion that I had not too long ago with someone who was pushing some kind of manifest destiny nonsense, where the fact that he was born in the West somehow proves that the West is superior to everything else. So I asked him what he'd think if he happened to have been born in, say, Niger, which, according to the Human Development Index, is the worst country on the planet to live in. Would the fact that he was born there make it the best place? Of course, he couldn't imagine ever having been born anywhere but where he was, so the whole discussion kind of spiraled out of control from there. Seriously, what is it with people who are so totally incapable of stepping back and evaluating reality without their personal emotional investment in it getting in the way?
Take, for example, the gravitational constant. If it was a bit stronger, all the atoms would have been pushed into a big ball.
Yeah, he's going to do it all again verbatim, and that's already been addressed, so let's not subject ourselves to it all over again. Fast forwarding.
If it was a bit weaker, the universe would have distributed atoms so widely that stars and galaxies could not form. We can argue about why the universe is fine-tuned, but there is no argument about whether or not the universe is fine-tuned. The second worst argument that atheists make is that the Christian God is just one of thousands of deities.
Are you denying that's the case? I mean, no atheist is going to suggest that any of these deities, yours included, are actually real. But are you suggesting that none of these other gods that man has made up for himself to worship, is that all just a figment of our imaginations now? Because that seems like an awfully odd claim to make.
It is true that thousands of deities have been created by man. However, this argument makes no sense because it does not understand the difference between monotheism and polytheism.
There is none at all. I know that you're emotionally attached to your beliefs, but fundamentally, there isn't a difference when it comes to the evidence. There is no evidence for any gods, monotheistic or polytheistic. Your personal preferences have zero bearing on the truth. Without evidence, objectively verifiable and demonstrable evidence, you're just circling the drain.
Just about every one of these deities are polytheistic deities. These deities are not all-powerful, all-knowing, or present everywhere.
Nor do they exist at all, at least not that we can tell. Just like yours, We're not interested in your bald rationalizations. We care only if the things that you believe can be demonstrated to be true in the real world that we all share. Get on that, won't you, Zach? Because you are arguing with yourself here. Nobody is concerned about your wishful thinking.
Only in monotheism do you see these traits, and there are three relevant monotheistic religions: Islam, Judaism, and Christianity.
Well, three that you want to consider, because there are plenty more. What about Baha'i? What about Balinese Hinduism? What about Ekankar? What about Rastafarianism, Sikhism, Tenjirism, Kaudai? Zoroastrianism was around a lot earlier than Christianity, earlier than Judaism, and certainly earlier than Islam. It's still around today. It was the first monotheistic religion. Really, what the hell are you on about here, Zach?
Now, the worst argument that atheists make, in my opinion, is Jesus mythicism.
You're not going to find a lot of people who will say that Jesus didn't exist in any form, but let's be honest, you have no evidence whatsoever that Jesus, the magical man-god that you believe in, the one that appears in the Bible, ever existed at all. If you've come up with some, by all means, present it, but until then, you're still wrong. So anyway, we've only been asking for that kind of thing for, forever, at least 2,000 years, but I suspect that he will, as Christians tend to do, suggest that, well, there just might have been some Palestinian rabbi a couple thousand years ago who preached a message, and eventually that got turned into Christianity, and, well, that's all they need to believe, that the supernatural mumbo-jumbo that got stapled onto him is actually so. But that's not going to work, Zach. Not for a second.
Even atheist scholars, such as Bart Ehrman, acknowledge that Jesus did, in fact, exist. He even wrote a whole book about it.
They suggest that a version of Jesus may have existed. Not the Jesus you believe in, but a human being that preached 2,000 years ago around Jerusalem. It's not the same thing. Please, go ask Bart Ehrman if he thinks a supernatural man-god actually existed. You're just being dishonest, which I guess is no surprise. Again, this is just Christians running around with the goalposts, pretending that they have a point when, in fact, they don't. It's really kind of sad.
There are many problems with Jesus' mythicism. These include, first, Paul's frequent mentioning of Christ and his acknowledgement of James as the brother of Jesus in Galatians 1.
You can't prove Paul existed either. See, this is the problem that you're having. You're just assuming that the Bible is true without actually demonstrating that the Bible is true. It's the ultimate downfall of Christianity because without evidence that these events ever actually happened, and you can't get that out of a single unconfirmed book of mythology, then all you have is faith, and faith is meaningless. It's why I keep asking you how you know these things. Where did you get the information that you claim to have, and how has that information been objectively tested to prove that it's actually the truth? And it's funny that none of these apologists ever have an answer, isn't it?
Second is the New Testament's ability to align with archaeology, which confirms that it was written with a historical setting in mind.
Wrong. Now, I kind of figured that you'd try this, so let's disabuse you of this ridiculous notion. Just because there are some things that align historically, that doesn't mean that everything does. It's like saying that just because the comics say that New York City exists, well, that somehow means that Spider-Man is real. It doesn't work that way. You are assuming things which are simply not demonstrable. We can also go back and look at my favorite example, the Trojan War, which was written about by Homer. Now, we know that at least some parts of the Trojan War actually took place. That doesn't mean that the gods and goddesses that he also wrote about were real. That doesn't mean that just because part of it is true, that all of it is true. Because we can't play favorites here. You have no choice in whether to accept that Zeus is real because he appears in the cyclic epics, or you have to deny that God is real because there's no evidence for him outside of the stories in the Bible. There are no double standards allowed here. Make your choice.
And third, outside sources such as Tacitus and Josephus, which attest the historicity of Jesus.
They do nothing of the sort. Neither Tacitus nor Josephus could have possibly seen a real living Jesus. They are relating stories that they heard. None of it was from personal eyewitness experience. Come on, Zach. Even you can't be this dishonest. Well, I don't know, maybe you can, or maybe you're just so disturbingly ignorant that you can't even imagine that you're wrong. Either way, all of these reasons are just ridiculously absurd. If this is the best you can do, I don't know what to tell you.
There is no good argument for Jesus' mythicism. Period.
There is no good argument for Jesus' existence. To do that, you need evidence. Got any? Yeah, that's what I thought.
So, yeah, just please stop with the Jesus mythicism. It makes no sense. So there it is. There are the 6 worst arguments against the existence of God and the truth of Christianity.
All of which fall completely apart the second that you look at them. And I can't say that I'm surprised because he's done all of this before, and they've all been completely taken apart. And he's still doing it all verbatim. What does that tell you about his honesty? Nothing good, my friends. Nothing good.
So I'm Zach, this is Adherent Apologetics. If you like this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
Yeah, that's why 71 people have disliked your video compared to 16 that have liked it. But then again, I don't think that Zach has any actual supporters. I've pointed this out before. Virtually none of the comments on any of his videos are actually from people who support him. It's almost all his detractors, which, again, he never answers directly. He's made one video responding to a couple of complaints that I've seen, but he got it all wrong, and what else is new? General day-to-day stuff? Nope. He just doesn't know how to click on reply and then type in a response. And another thing that should be obvious to anyone who's been on this journey through his back catalog with me, he never changes his mind on anything, even when he's been proven completely wrong. These are the same responses that we've seen over and over and over again, even after people like myself and others have corrected his misconceptions. Because Zach clearly doesn't give a damn about the facts. He's only listening to people on his side of the aisle, whether they're right or wrong, and he's not going to go out and try to verify their story. He doesn't care. It's all about the feels, and the reals can just screw the hell right off. And then, when people tell him that he's dishonest, he gets upset instead of, not being dishonest. Because continuing to spew the same load of demonstrably and proven false nonsense over and over and over again, even after you have been corrected on it and proven wrong, there is no other word that you can use. And I guess that's yet another error that we can attribute to Zach. Can anyone say that they're honestly surprised?
Boom, dicky, 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 boom.